If it's your first time here, thank you for joining us. It's sad to say goodbye to some members. It's wonderful to welcome others. And we hope that you will always find the Aberdeen Church friendly, welcoming. We hope that you might be motivated to come and sing for us or do something, even if it's in Twee. It's wonderful to have so many different groups here, and I'm a bit worried because we've been saying goodbye to several families from Nigeria. But I don't worry too much because we've got lots of people from Ghana joining us. And from Guyana as well, and from everywhere. It's wonderful to have all of you here. And to those who join us online today, I know it's difficult weather situations, and some people have joined to be with us, and we're thinking of you. We heard some of your prayer requests as well, and we thank you for thinking about us and being with us. I've slowly been working my way through the book of James. This time that I preach on James. And so it's been quite an adventure, and it's fun. And almost just by accident, it has, every time that I've preached, I've told a little bit of autobiography that comes with it. And I thought last time I came to the end of it, but today I can still share a little bit, but it maybe not. In the past, it was quite exciting about doing all kinds of things and participating, being naughty as a child, experiencing God's blessings in our lives. Today is a little bit different, but we're looking at James chapter 3, and I think it's verse 13 onwards. And the question that it begins with is, who is wise and understanding among you? That's a question. And I think the story that I thought I'll share is actually just to say that oftentimes, how shall I put it? Just 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege of attending a 3 missions pastors retreat with Pastor Bill Knott, the preacher who preached at the Day of Fellowship, spent 3 days with us. And it was really an instructive 3 days. But he made one point about pastors. He says pastors are always having to minister the grace of God to their churches, because that's what is at the core of the spiritual Christian experience. And yet they are also experiencing the grace of God in their own lives. And oftentimes it's difficult to come to terms with the grace of God in your own life. And it's easier to just talk about the grace of God to others. I don't know if you understand that there can sometimes be a challenge that way. And I've also experienced that in my own life. I remember, I think I told you at one point that I got married to this beautiful woman by the name of Weiers Coetser, and I had been married to her for about 7 years. And one of the wonderful things that happened in our lives at that time is I was a youth-orientated minister, and I always had the dream to work at our Adventist college and at our Adventist University in South Africa, Heidelberg College. And guess what? After a few years of ministry, the opportunity came. They invited me to become the dormitory dean of Heidelberg College. So a dormitory dean, you say, what is a pastor doing being a dormitory dean? Actually, it's a very pastoral job. In fact, they often ask an ordained minister to go and take up that job, to look after young people who are studying to become the ministry, young people who are in the high school over there. And so I moved there, and there were 79 young people in the boys' dormitory, and I was very excited because I could look after them, and I could be involved with young people for the rest of the time. My wife became a teacher, and every time you move, this is the challenge. When you move, then your family gets a little bit of an upheaval. My daughter was 3 years old, I think, 4 years old. My wife got a job about 50 miles away from where we lived in a public school, and it was a difficult time. For the first time in our lives, we're married about 7 years. My wife was struggling with some difficulties in her life. She's probably spoken about it. Depression took a hold of her. Her father had recently passed away. There was some stories in the family of pain and broken relationships. And I was a young pastor. I was full of life. And the business of the dormitory is constantly busy. It's stressful. It's a big job. I remember one morning, a typical morning for me would be at 5:30 in the morning, the knock would come on the door and it would say, Pastor Weiers there. I'm busy dying. And it's a young student who has not been able to sleep throughout the night. So I say, okay, we'll take you down to the doctor. Every time you put somebody in the car, you go and spend 3-4 hours by the doctor, hoping that they will be able to see them, negotiating medical insurance and stuff. You come back, you've got committees, you've got teaching, you've got other events that are busy taking place. And then that evening, around about 7 o'clock, you do prayer meeting with the young people. And at 10:30 at night, suddenly I'm working in my office and I just hear this bang against the door. And I wonder what's going on. And it just keeps banging and you hear a noise. So I go open the door. And as I open the door, 2 big students come rushing through the door and they're busy grabbing each other by the throat. Thank you, Sister Lorna. Thank you for being kind to me again. You know what students are like. They get angry with each other. And they were fighting with each other. And I was making peace between them. And that was a typical work week for me, doing this 6-7 days a week, working from 5:30 till 10 in the day. When you're at home and your wife isn't feeling well and you're struggling, during that time, things can often go quite bad for you. There's kind of disharmony that can take place. I didn't realize that my life was being run by stress. And I was looking at my wife and I was saying, you're not cooking the food that I want you to cook. By the way, it's never a wife's job to cook for her husband. If she does, it's actually quite nice if she does. It's a blessing, it's a gift. But for me, I became very critical because I expected my wife wasn't doing this, she wasn't doing that, and I became an angry person. And I could see, and I lacked the wisdom. I was 31 years old. I didn't realize the kind of challenges that my wife was navigating in her own life. You know, being a teacher isn't an easy job for where you can be. And so my wife would come back home and what we would do to relax for ourselves would often be the kind of things that I've learned through experience you really shouldn't be doing. So what you'll do is you'll put your computer on. It was in the early days of the internet. And at that time, there was one person at the college who was very good at downloading movies from the internet, illegal movies, pirated movies. So there was a whole stash. So my wife would watch her movie on her computer. I will watch my movie on my computer. And away we would go. But the more you sit looking at the screen, the less communication you have with each other. And so it just got more and more and more unhappy. The house was always too untidy. I was never able to tidy the house. My wife didn't tidy the house. We would fight with each other. We would criticize each other, and we would feel but at the same time, you're dealing with young people who need to experience God's grace in their lives. I remember one of the young people was a missionary's son. There was a hospital in Lesotho called Maluti Hospital. Father is a medical doctor, so what they do is they send their son to come to Heidelberg College, and the son arrives with 2 kilograms of, in South Africa we call it dacha, cannabis. So I didn't know about it. And Lesotho is like the cannabis factory of the world. It's the place where cannabis is grown. So he gets it cheaply, he comes in. Another ADRA worker who works somewhere in Mozambique sends their son to our school, and that son also has some challenges. And what happens is their son breaks into our school tuck shop. They find like a way to come in. They steal a whole lot of food and batteries and stuff. And the tuck shop owner comes to the dormitory dean and says, can you please show us, can you please do a search of all the rooms? Now, you wouldn't be able to get away with that today anymore. But I just went, I used my master key, and I went and searched each one of the bedrooms. And guess what? In the process of finding, I found like 660 batteries, AAA batteries that were stolen from the tuck shop. And I opened the next cupboard, and there I found 2 kilograms of cannabis. So the 2 young men are in serious trouble. And they get called before a disciplinary committee, and we talk to them, and the parents fly from Mozambique and from Maluti to come and talk. And the school says, sorry, we can't have these young people. And I say, we need to give these young people another chance. And the school says, no, they need to go. And I said, no, we have to give them another chance. We must. And it became like a fight. And they said to me eventually, you're the dormitory dean, so we will listen to you. But what they did is they sent the children away for the rest of the semester, the term, which was about a month. And they said, when they come back, we want to see a different behavior. But they said, you, as the dormitory dean, need to keep a special eye on these young people. It was amazing. Those young people came back. And I can't say it was easy. They got into more trouble. And yet somehow they managed to survive throughout their whole high school career. One of those young people today is a medical doctor doing doctoring work in South America. The other one died in a car accident about 4 years afterwards in their lives. But I can't express the tremendous privilege to reach out to young people who need to experience God's grace, and just to say to them, God loves you wherever you are, and whatever you do, God's love for you will never go away. And I was able to show some of that to the young people, and it has made a difference in those lives. But at the very same time, in my house, things are going pear-shaped. Things feel like it's not working out very well. I think Simone has told the story, so I'm not breaking any of that. But she, I think what brought it to a head for us was when she tried to take her own life one day. She phoned me. I just got a message. She says, I'm sorry, but I have to go. And we ended up phoning the police and found her parked by the beach in a total state back to hospital where she had to spend 4 days. And at that time, we got a counselor in to start talking. But it's quite amazing. I was talking to the counselor. She was talking to the counselor, and I was saying, I'm so angry. How could it be that you want to just give up on me? I don't know if you can hear that, but don't do what I did. Okay, don't follow my example. But I was quite upset that my wife just can't pull her life together, and the counselor had to end up speaking to me very harshly, or not harshly, but says, you need to focus on your wife. Your wife has a job to do to get better. It's not about you, about where you can be. And it was a lesson that took me, I'll be honest with you, it took me 3-4 years, I think, to learn. But it was because I had a job to do myself. And that was the job to understand what it means to really experience grace in my own life. Because while I was willing to offer grace to other people, I wasn't giving myself the grace to give myself space to be a fallible human being and to be married to somebody who's a fallible human being. I only learned it when I moved here to the UK, to Northern Ireland, and my wife had started improving quite a lot, but we were still struggling with just relationship issues, just being generous and kind to each other. And we realized that we're better, but we're not where we need to be. And we went and we called for more help. And it was a counselor in Northern Ireland that spoke to us. And for the first time, that counselor sat down and said, Weiers, you need to learn to become, let the other person be whoever they want to be. You don't have to change their behavior. The only thing that you can do is you can focus on your own behavior, and you can find your own happiness despite what the other person was able to do. And it broke through to me, and I thank God that it did, because that is what means that my wife and I are still happily married with each other at that time. But I couldn't have done it just completely on my own. I needed the help that I needed to get from other people. So I'm probably not telling the story in a very eloquent, and because it's a place of pain, I think, in my life, but it's also a place where there's been tremendous growth and where I've experienced tremendous grace, including grace from my wife, who was able to put up with my attitude. And this is, I think, what I want to explore today, again, is if we just look at James chapter 3, and let's just, because I think James chapter 3, verse 13 is very much an MOT. It's doing a test. It's asking, it's challenging us to explore what it is that makes a difference and really in our lives and where we should do it. And so the question is, who is it that's wise and understanding among you? And I think one of the things that might come out from what I've already said is that sometimes you can look wise and understanding, but are you really wise and understanding? Or you can act in wise ways in some places, but in other places you might not be wise. And it's the typical question that the prophets of the Old Testament would ask for Israel. They say to Israel, you're such a holy people. You worship God every Sabbath. You go to your temple. You put these wonderful clothes on. But what do you get when you just lift the lid a little bit and see what's underneath those clothes, and what kind of people are you for where you might be able to be? And so let's have a look. How do you know if you're wise? Do we know somebody in our church who's wise? I hope so. I hope that Elder Coy is a wise man. I look at Elder Rabina and I say, there's a wise man. I want to follow. Actually, all of us, so many wisdom that we have around in our church. But have a look at what James says in verse 14. First, the answer in verse 13. Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. There's an interesting word for wisdom, meekness. Do we all know what meekness means? It means to be relatively soft. It means to be without a sharp edge about ourselves. It means to be gracious and to take a while before we jump to conclusions for where people can be. Have a look at the opposite of that. But if you have bitter envy and you're self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. And I was just thinking to myself that that's actually something that, what does envy look like in a church? What does envy look like in our lives? Does envy look like me comparing myself with other people? I became aware the other day of somebody who had the opportunity to develop themselves in a way that I've always wished I could. And said, my goodness, how did that person succeed in doing that? And I felt deep inside of myself a little bit of envy popping up and said, why didn't I have that opportunity? Have you experienced that in your life? And then you start saying, oh, what am I going to do? I have to put that person in his place, or I have to show that person, I have to show other people that I'm better than the other person. And fortunately, I caught that feeling inside of myself, and I said, James chapter 3, you need to, Christian community doesn't need that. We don't need to compare ourselves on a constant basis, but it constantly happens. The Facebook is wonderful, the way that you see somebody put a beautiful photo of a holiday somewhere, and you say, don't you wish that you could be on holiday over there? What is it that their lives are so much better than ours? And when you start making these comparisons, these feelings begin to arise inside of our lives. Sometimes the people who travel and go to places find that they carry so much more stress and worry in their lives than the people who stay put. But the people who stay put, they look at the ones who travel and say, I wish I could have a life like that. And it's quite interesting how we always compare. The grass always looks better on the other side. So if we do a MOT of our lives, and if we do an MOT of our church, are there places where we look at other people and we make judgments of the other people based on a standard that we set, or where we make a judgment of ourselves? Then I wonder if God is maybe talking to you, because maybe that's a place that we need to challenge ourselves to make our lives just a little bit more meek and a little bit more kind, and allow the other person to be who they are so that we can become the person that we are. What else? So let's have a look at this wisdom does not descend from above. This is verse 15, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic. So here we get a challenge, and that's why my sermon is called Navigating Crossroads, because you've got two roads, and there's one road of wisdom, and then there's another road of wisdom, and they kind of cross inside of all of our lives. And the one road of wisdom is the road of that comes from God. And then there's another road of wisdom, which, can you hear the words that James used to talk about it? Talks about demonic kind of wisdom. My goodness, that's a strong language. Because when we think of demonic, who do we think of? We think of the story in Mark where there's this gentleman who's busy cutting himself and doing weird things and breaking chains. And Jesus has to come and he has to chase the demons out. But I wonder if we maybe underestimate the world that we live in, and that there are certain values in this world that are just as dangerous to us than somebody who experiences possession in their lives. And I wonder if we imbibe that into our lives. Maybe an example would be all of us live in an environment where the kingdom of this world, the king of this world, the Satan, in a way, still has a sway, and he wants to import his values into our lives. And those values are, I need to have more. I just need to have fun all the time. I just need to have excitement in my life. I can be better than other people. I can earn more money. I can have more flashy goods in my life. And all of us have that road that walks through our lives because we live in this world that we're in. I think an example would be, maybe not a good example, but I've got a blue suit and I've got I don't know what color this is, purple lilac. And all of us have, shall we say, blue, purple and lilac. The one is the one color that comes from what the devil puts into this world and what he values. And all of us have a little bit of blue, which might be, shall we call it, royalty that comes from God, that God says to us. And the question is, if we give the purple, so that if we allow that to become stronger in our lives, and somebody comes and they press our buttons, it will be simply like we just shed the blue very quickly, okay? And all that we become is purple. And then purple takes over in our lives, and which is the values of the world, for example. But can we somehow get rid of the purple? I'm not going to get rid of the purple now. So maybe it's not working that well, the illustration. But all of us have both of these colors in our lives. But the one can become stronger than the other. And when we are under pressure, the prayer is that it's the side of grace, it's the side of meekness, it's the side of gentleness that will be able to show up. I hope I'm making sense. I don't want to talk too much, but maybe I just want to have a look at verse 17. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, and then peaceable, it's gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. And again, to me, if I had to get to the core bits of what it means to be a Christian, it is to experience God's grace in my life in such a way. Not that it makes me a better teacher, because I can be a good teacher, but I can still have the wrong color inside of my life. It doesn't make me a person who knows more than other people. It doesn't put me on a pedestal that I'm the best, but it generates inside of me a spirit of meekness, of love, of peace, and of somebody who's able to make a difference in their lives. To me, that's a huge challenge. I have to do it every single day. I have to experience it wherever I am. I've got some good news for you, because I know all of us struggle with these issues, but let's just read chapter 4 and see if we can find some clues about what we need to do. Where do wars and fights come from among you? This is the question that is being asked. Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? So again, that's a question of doing introspection and say, what is it that drives you? Is it just, do I just want to accomplish something? Do I just want to have a good feeling? He uses very strong language, James. He says, adulterers. In other words, you just want to give away your heart to something that doesn't belong to what God has given. You almost think of the story of the book of Hosea, where he got married to a wife who kept running off, just giving something. That's what James is saying. If you keep giving your heart to what the world wants, then you become like that. Do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you think that Scripture says in vain, the Spirit who dwells in us yearns jealously? So again, God is desperate for us to give our lives fully to Him. God is desperate for us to let go of our own selves and our own egos and what we want to do, and just to give it to God. And He desperately wants that. But have a look at verse 6, and I'm going to finish around about here, because I think the next few verses is so hopeful. But He gives more grace. And this is the amazing thing, because maybe you might feel a bit overwhelmed by the fact that you haven't reached a standard of perfection. I often feel that way, that you haven't accomplished what you need to accomplish in your life. Maybe your life also feels overwhelmingly towards the purple side rather than to God's blue side, so to speak. But what does God say? He gives more grace. And we just need to experience grace in our lives. God resists those who are proud, but He gives grace to those who are humble. How do we become humble? It's by us just recognizing, God, we've tried our best, but we haven't succeeded. We want to give our lives over to You, and we want You to take control of our lives. So listen to this advice, and therefore submit to God. Yeah, resist the devil. And what will the devil do? He will flee from you. Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your heart, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep, and let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up. Humble, make ourselves humble. Realize that everything that we are striving to achieve, as long as we try to do it on our own, we're not going to be able to do it. And then realize that we can give up what we're striving for, and then God can begin to rebuild, and He can lift us up for where we are. Yeah. I love the advice He gives in verse 11, and that's the last. We can often see the faults in other people far better than we can see in ourselves. And sometimes we can say, oh, that person is so proud. That person has got this air of accomplishment, but just look at how they live their lives when we're not around. And people can see that. But what does the Bible say? Don't judge that person. Don't speak evil to a brother. The one who speaks evil judges his brother, speaks evil of the law, and judges the law. That's very powerful. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. Therefore, there is one lawgiver who's able to save and to destroy. And who are you to judge one another? It's hard not to judge. It's hard to, sometimes we feel so hurt by what other people have done, and we find all the things that they've done wrong. But what God says is, let God sort that out. God will work in that person's life. The thing that we do in our own lives is we just work with who we are and what God wants us to become. And we, by being humble, we can grow and we can become better. I think I'm going to stop there. I hope I've given you something to think about, and hope I haven't traumatized you too much with the story of my life. There's a beautiful song that we would like to sing, number 315, Oh, for a Closer Walk with Thee.